Hello everyone, welcome to today's webinar. I'm Kishor, a product manager in the Azure Network Security CXC CAT team at Microsoft. I'm joined by my colleague Gustavo Modena, and together we are excited to walk you through what's new in Azure Firewall. For today's agenda, we will first look at an overview of Azure Firewall. Then we will look at the new and recent enhancements to the Azure Firewall, and we will also demo these capabilities and conclude with some time for question and answers towards the end. Let's start with the basics. What is Azure Firewall and why do we need it? As we can see, today's organizations are operating in a complex environment. Applications are spread across hybrid and multi-cloud architectures. Users expect secure, seamless access from anywhere. And the threat landscape continues to evolve rapidly, with attacks growing in both sophistication and scale. Therefore, it's very important to ensure that the network traffic itself is consistently inspected, filtered, and secured. Whether it's traffic between workloads in the cloud, across regions, or to and from the internet, network protection is a critical foundation. That's exactly where Azure Firewall comes in. Azure Firewall is Microsoft's cloud-native network security service built to help you secure your workloads at scale. It provides fully stateful network traffic filtering, application layer inspection for outbound HTTP/HTTPS traffic, built-in threat intelligence, automatically blocking known malicious IPs and domains. It deploys and scales in minutes. It provides support for east-west and north-south traffic. So east-west traffic is traffic that flows within a network or within a cloud environment. And north-south traffic is traffic that flows in and out of a network to and fro from external sources like the internet. Azure Firewall also provides outbound source NAT support and inbound destination NAT support. It can be deployed across multiple availability zones to provide 99.99% SLA. And most importantly, Azure Firewall is not a one-size-fits-all. It comes in 3 SKUs. The basic SKU is designed for SMBs or lightweight use cases. The standard SKU meets the needs of enterprise and government workloads, and the premium SKU adds advanced capabilities such as TLS inspection, IDPS, and URL filtering, perfect for highly regulated or high security environments. So here's a comparison of the basic, standard, and premium SKUs right here. As seen, the basic covers essential filtering, NAT, and provides threat intelligence in alert mode only. Standard adds scalability up to 30 Gbps, threat intelligence in both alert and deny modes, support for outbound web category-based filtering, and custom DNS support. While Premium includes all of these features here, including advanced threat protection like TLS inspection, IDPS for high security environments, and higher scalability up to 100 Gbps. This tiered approach helps you choose the right level of protection for your workloads based on your needs. Let's review some different use cases where you can implement the Azure Firewall in your environment. In the first virtual network deployment implementation, you can deploy the firewall directly into a virtual network using the traditional hub and spoke method. In this instance, the Azure Firewall lives within a centralized virtual network called the hub virtual network, where all the networks with workloads will peer directly with the hub virtual network. This allows for inspection within the same virtual network, between spoke virtual networks, traffic to the internet, and additionally traffic to and from an on-premises branch or another cloud provider using VPN or Express Route Circuit. So now Azure Firewall can also be deployed into a virtual WAN hub, thus turning it into a secured hub. This setup delivers the same traffic inspection capabilities as a traditional virtual network deployment, while Azure Firewall Manager handles routing automatically, making management simpler and enabling global scalability. Finally, Azure Firewall can be configured in force tunnel mode, where it inspects traffic first and then forwards it to a designated virtual appliance, such as another Azure Firewall or a third-party firewall deployed either on-premises or elsewhere for further inspection or internet breakout. With that foundation in place, let's shift gears and dive into what's new in Azure Firewall. So first we'll look at the draft and deploy feature. So Azure Firewall's draft and deploy is a new preview feature that introduces a safer, more collaborative way to manage firewall policies. Just to understand better, a firewall policy is the brain of the firewall containing all the security and operational settings needed to enforce network protection consistently across environments. So it is a centralized, reusable configuration object that can be applied on multiple firewalls across different regions and subscriptions using Firewall Manager. Now, coming back to draft and deploy, traditionally any change made to an Azure Firewall policy, no matter how small, would trigger a full deployment of the policy on the attached firewall. This process could take 2 to 4 minutes per change, and each deployment carried the risk of misconfiguration or service disruption. Therefore, to combat this, the draft and deploy feature introduces a two-phase workflow. First one is the draft phase. Here you clone the current live policy into a draft version. You then make multiple changes where you can either add, modify, delete rules without affecting live traffic. You can also collaborate with peers, assign reviewers, and iterate it safely. So once the draft is completed, you then go to the deploy phase. Here you review the draft to approve all the changes made before applying it to the firewall. Deploy all the changes atomically, replacing the live policy in one go. So you can also assign only specific users like admins the permissions for deploying the draft by assigning them the appropriate permissions so that not everybody can actually go ahead and deploy it. So this approach minimizes downtime, reduces deployment errors, and supports structured review cycles. It improves efficiency and meets formal change management requirements. Some important things to note regarding this feature are once you have a draft, try not to use the policy directly to make changes, or the draft will fail due to change of the policy version. So make sure that you have the same approach of following a draft and deploy for everyone. Also, one more thing is the rule collection groups are not available to be created via draft and deploy and needs to be pre-created. So the next is the customer controlled updates. As you know, Azure Firewall is a managed service, which means Microsoft regularly pushes updates to ensure security, compliance, and performance. However, these updates can cause transient network disruptions, especially for legacy applications like SAP or Azure Virtual Desktop that rely on persistent connections. To address this, Azure Firewall now supports customer control maintenance windows. This allows you to schedule a daily 5-hour window during which updates are allowed. This prevents updates outside this window, reducing unexpected downtime. This also helps you align updates with your operational hours, ensuring business continuity. Let's look at an example scenario. Imagine you're managing a firewall for a customer running SAP workloads that require stable, long-lived connections. So before customer-controlled updates, Microsoft could push an update at 2 a.m. UTC. For some geographies, this might overlap with critical business hours. SAP sessions drop unexpectedly, causing errors and disruptions, and you had no control over when updates occurred. Now, with customer-controlled updates, you configure your own maintenance window, example, 1 a.m. to 6 a.m. local time. So now the Azure Firewall only applies updates during this chosen window. So the SAP workloads remain stable outside of the window, avoiding business impact. So customer control updates gives you predictability and more control over your security posture. Some important things to note regarding this feature are the schedule doesn't include host updates or critical security updates that still happen irrespective. And this feature does not provide any advanced notifications for Azure Firewall maintenance. Now let's go to demonstrating these two features. Here I have my firewall here. So I'm going to go to my firewall policy, and we're going to click on the draft and deploy here under the management section. Here, I'm going to click on create a draft. That creates a draft here for us, which has all of the rules and the settings. So now you can go to the rule collections. You can go to the rules and make some changes to your rule. So I'm going to go to the IDPS section here. I'm going to change it to the alert section. That's one change I made. And then I don't see any rule collections here because I think I should see my draft here. I'm just going to add a rule. So if I come to deploy here, I can see that the rule that I added will be visible in the green here. This is the new rule that has been added. Everything else does not have anything that doesn't have the green are previous rules. So only the part that is green is the rule that has been added recently. So this gives you a chance to review it before you actually go ahead and deploy the draft here. So you can also look at the rules in different rule collection groups right here. And then this right here will tell you the changes you've made in the actual settings, which is the DNS, the IDPS, or SNAT. Those changes will be visible here. So if you have another colleague who also has access to this, so all of those, if they make any changes, all of those changes together will be visible right here in the draft policy. So then you can review it. So by giving a specific permission, you can, so the permission right here, which is the deploy action permission, you can give this permission only to the admin so that only the admin has the permissions to actually deploy this draft. So now if I go ahead and deploy it, this together deploys all of the changes I've made to this policy. So that's about it. Let's give it some time for the changes, and we can, in the meanwhile, look at the other feature, that's the maintenance feature. So here, this is where you set up the maintenance. So you go ahead and add a configuration here, and then you create a new maintenance control configuration. You give it a name, and then you edit schedule. Then you give it a start date and the time, and you definitely need to have a minimal of 5 hours of window. You can increase it, but this is the minimal. And then you can add a end date if needed. And then it definitely repeats every day. So that's by default, and you cannot change that. So once you have that, you can save it and you can enable it. Right, so now you can see the configuration assigned here, and it will immediately start going into picture. So there's another way you can also add the maintenance configurations, which is through this maintenance configurations tab. So you can go to the maintenance configuration and create a configuration here, and then you can give it a name. And then you can choose a scope, which here is the resource, which includes the network gateways and network security. So then you have to choose network security, which is the Azure Firewall. And then you add a schedule right here. And then you have to pick your resources right here. So it'll show you all of your Azure Firewall resources, and then you have to pick it, and then you have to assign it. So that's another way to do the assign the maintenance configuration. So let's also take a look at the draft and deploy here quickly. I believe it's still being updated, so you can't see it yet, but that's kind of how you assign the draft and deploy the draft and deploy policy. So that's all I have today. So with that, I will now hand over the stage to my colleague Gustavo to discuss the next few features. Thank you so much.
Hey, Sai, thank you. Hello, everyone. Let me just start sharing my screen. I hope y'all can see it now.
Looks good.
Thank you. So for the second part of the what's new, I'm going to talk about some other features. But before we talk about this feature, I think it's important to mention one of the logging methods that we have available for Azure Firewall, right? So in Azure Firewall, we have two ways of saving logs. The first one is using Azure Diagnostics, which is more like a legacy schema used by Azure Firewall. And then we also have what we call structured logs or resource-specific logs. These structured logs, they are the type of data that are organized in a more specific format for firewall, and they use a predefined schema that makes more sense, and it's easier for searching, filtering, and analyzing the data created by the firewall, right? When we used to have only the Azure Diagnostic logs, it was more like unstructured logs, which consisted on a free-form text, and it required a lot of parsing on the user side, right? So whenever you want to, you had to query your data or query your logs to find any information about any specific traffic, you had to go through and do a lot of parsing because the data wasn't unstructured, right? And the first feature that I want to talk about here is the support for Azure Firewall support of the Azure Monitor Basic Plan. Previously, it wasn't supported by Azure Firewall, and then this was one of the things that the engineering started looking at because of many customers worry about costs on Azure Firewall logs, right? So when we introduced the structured logs, it already brought a lot of saving, compared to what Azure Diagnostics used to be. But then with this new basic plan, we are bringing even more control on what customers will spend with Azure Firewall logs, right? So this basic plan, it provides it is more like an economical solution without you losing the data or you losing the logs that are important for you, right? There are a few things to take in consideration before you enable the basic logs. So first thing is that these basic logs is enabled at your log analytics workspaces. So once you are sending the logs to your log analytics workspaces, the tables are created there. You need to manage this configuration in each one of the tables you want to enable the basic plan. And once you do that, you need to take in consideration some of the limitations of the basic plan. Like, for example, some of the custom query limitations are like time range. So you cannot go up to past 30 days. So this is one of the limitations. You also have some limitations on the query scope and number of concurrent queries that you can run. With the basic plan, you can only run two concurrent queries. And then there is also some limitations in regards of purge, right? I will share here the document link to the documentation, where you'll be able to find more details about the basic plan. One thing to mention is that these limitations are not really an Azure Firewall limitation. They are really a limitation on how we implemented the basic plan to help with cost savings. And if you feel like, hey, these limitations, these limitations are not good for the way how I consume the logs, right? So then maybe the basic plan is not the ideal for you, and you should consider just the regular tables, right? So let me put it here in the chat, basic plan. So I just put the link in the chat so you can find more information about the limitations. And I'll demonstrate this later on, but once you enable the plan, it may take some time for refreshing your log analytics workspace and your table. And but then once it's enabled, you need to take in consideration the cost of running the queries, right? So you're gonna pay for the queries you run and the size of the queries as well. So by the size of the queries, I mean it depends on how much data you have, what's the scope of the query that you're running, and like for example, if you have 1 gigabits of log, then and you are running this query over these 100 gigabits, then the cost will incur on top of that, right? So that's why when using the basic plan, it's really important for you to use a very specific scope when running the queries and not running on everything, because depending on the scope, the cost of the query will be higher than some other queries. The next feature that I want to talk about here is also related to Azure Firewall logging, and this one is a little bit different. This one is also thinking on cost savings, right? So for those customers who don't want to enable the basic logging because they really need to run a lot of queries, they use the workbooks for for their operation teams, and for fighting threats in the Azure Firewall and all of that. Maybe the basic plan is not the best approach. But they still don't want to have too many logs being sent to a log analytics workspace. So the ingestion time transformation is something that's been available in the Azure Monitor for quite some time, but it wasn't available for Azure Firewall. But now what we are doing is we are just making this available in Azure Firewall, that allows you to create a transformation that will run in the cloud pipeline. And then this transformation is pretty much creating what we call a data collection rule, or a DCR. This data collection rule will run on, before sending your logs to the log analytics workspace, before the ingestion of the logs in your log analytics workspace. So the clients, as we can see in the diagram here, right? So the clients will digest the data. It will send the data to the pipeline. The pipeline then will run the transformation based on the definitions that you have in your data collection rule, following the scheme, incoming stream, and all of that. And once the transformation is applied, the data is transformed and then sent to your log analytics workspace. What are the benefits with that? Let's say, for example, you are a customer that don't want to see all the logs for IDPS signatures that are classified as low severity, or maybe you don't want to see everything that's being alert only. You want to just focus on what's denied. So what you can do, you can create a custom query where you will filter your logging based on these criteria and create a DCR. So the DCR I'll show you next is based on a custom query that will run in your tables, and then the data that's being filtered will be sent to the log analytics workspace. So the benefits, it helps with security monitoring because you don't lose track of the things that you really need to focus on. It helps with cost optimization because you are storing less data in the log analytics workspace. It helps with compliance because you still have all the data that you need, and that's required based on the industry you work on. It helps with instance responses, and you can still create custom alerts based on if you're using the ingestion time transformation. There are two, just to mention, there are two blogs in our tech community. One of them is about the basic plan, where we show, we explain what I'm explaining here. We show how to make the changes using the portal. And one thing that I forgot mentioning is that for the basic plan, it is not supported if you are using the policy analytics and if you are using the security Copilot with Azure Firewall, right? If you do use those two features, what we recommend is enabling the basic on the other tables, but not on the Azure IDP, the AZFW IDPS and the threat intelligence tables, because those are, and the aggregation tables, because those are the ones that are used by policy analytics in the security Copilot. But for the other tables, you can enable, but just take in consideration the limitations that I mentioned. For the ingestion time transformation, it also have a caveat, like for example, if you are using the embedded workbooks or if you have your own workbooks, you need to know if the transformation that you will create will not affect the queries that you have running in your environment, right? So before creating any DCRs and applying those transformations to in your tables, make sure that you are not using any specific queries that will break after applying the transformation. Okay, then before going to the demo, I just want to really briefly talk about two other features. We already discussed these features in our What's New for Azure Firewall previously, but they were released in public preview. Now these features are released in GA. The first one is the Security Copilot embedded experience. So Security Copilot is the integration between our Security Copilot AI with Azure Firewall that will help you on investigating, some activities that's going through your Azure Firewall, right? So it helps you identifying, let's say, for example, specific threats that are hitting signatures in your firewall or hitting specific rules. It helps you investigate and learn more about the signatures or what the vulnerabilities are. It also helps you investigating across different firewalls if you have different firewalls in your environment. So without having to create custom queries to go through all the logs and all of that, you can use the Security Copilot to help you on this investigation. Initially it was released using the standalone experience. Now it's available in the portal as well, as we call the embedded experience. So you can use it to go through the logs, and of course it depends on the logs being enabled. And this one is also dependent on the structure log. So if you're using the Azure Diagnostics, Security Copilot doesn't support that. You have to be using the structure logs for this one. And then the next feature is also another feature that was discussed previously in public preview. Now it's GA, and this feature now allows us to use the Azure Firewall private IP address for creating DNAT rules. Previously, Azure Firewall only supported DNAT rules on the public IP address of the firewall. So we've heard a lot of customer feedback where they have scenarios like, for example, overlap networks where they need to use the firewall to allow traffic between these overlapped networks, but they needed to be able using the private IP of the firewall. Another scenario where the private IP DNAT is very useful is in scenarios where you have networks that are not that have no routing between them. So you can use the Azure Firewall to create the bridge between those networks, and just by using the private IP address of the firewall. Again, we are showing, you know, in this screenshot here, the configuration through the portal, but this configuration is available through PowerShell and CLI as well. Or if you are using templates, you can also use these through templates, no problem. Okay, let me go to the demo. So for the demo, let me bring it up here. Okay, so the demo that I will show you is really based on the basic plan and then on the transformation. So I will start with the basic plan. So first thing, I need to make sure, let me go to my firewall first. First thing, I need to make sure that I have my data, my logs being sent to a log analytics workspace, right? So for that, we need to go to our firewall under diagnostic settings, and then create a diagnostic setting here if you don't have one already. Again, you need to be using resource-specific logs. The basic plan or the transformation does not support Azure Diagnostic destination tables. So make sure that your diagnostic settings is using or sending the data to a resource-specific logs. One thing to mention here is that when you are creating these diagnostic settings, you're going to see all of these categories on the left side. What I usually see is many customers selecting everything. But what happens here is that when you select everything, you are selecting the new categories, but also the legacy categories, right? And for the resource specific, we don't need to select these 3 categories that are, you know, that have this flag for legacy Azure Diagnostics. So this is the configuration. Make sure that you are selecting the rules, the categories that you want, and then make sure that you are sending them all to a resource specific. Once you have this done, and then all the tables are created, if you just created the Azure Diagnostic, allow it some time for the tables to be created in the Log Analytics workspace. It can take up to 30 to 45 minutes sometimes. Usually it's faster than that, but allow it some time for the tables to be created. And then once the tables are created, what you need to do is go to your Log Analytics workspace under tables, and then you'll be able to find the tables, not only for your file, but also any other tables related to other resources that you have, you know, diagnostic settings enabled. So here I'm going to just filter by AZFW because these are the tables that are used by Azure Firewall. And then right here, I have one table already using the basic configuration, right? Let's say I want to enable another one. So pretty much what I'm doing here is selecting the table, going to the 3 dots at the end, and then doing the manage table. And then in the manage table, we have 3 different plans. Actually, for Azure Firewall, we have 2, right? So the analytics and the basic one. So the analytics is the one that that's been supported since the beginning. And then now with the introduction of the basic plan, you can enable this. Notice the difference when you select basic and enable in analytics. The basic one doesn't allow you to have any analytics retention or anything like that. So that's also in that documentation that I shared about the limitations, right? So once you enable this, just save it. It may take some time for all the updates to be done here, right? Again, if you are using Policy Analytics or if you are using Security Copilot, don't apply the basic on these, let me show you here, on these aggregation tables, because these are the ones that are used by the policy analytics to create the summary of rule hits and all of that. And also don't enable that in the Azure Threat Intel, because that's also part of the policy analytics, or into the IDPS signature. The IDPS signature table is used by both policy analytics and security Copilot. So the aggregation tables, IDPS signature, and the threat intel are the ones that should not be configured as basic if you are using policy analytics and security Copilot. Once you do that, the queries work. The queries that you're going to run are pretty much the same thing. It doesn't change the structure of the query or anything like that. You'll probably notice a message the first time you run a query on that specific table saying that you're gonna be charged per query on that table, right? So that's the only thing to be aware of. Okay, so that's for the basic, very straightforward. It doesn't require a lot of configuration. But please make sure that we're not enabling these in the tables for features that don't support these. So the other thing that I'm going to show you here is the transformation, right? So I have the transformation enabled in my IDPS signature table. Usually, what you're going to do if you don't have a transformation or a DCR yet, you're going to come to the table, select the three dots here, and say, hey, create a transformation, right? And then for creating the transformation, you need to go to next, and then this is the current schema. So the current schema doesn't have any filtering applied, so it's just grabbing everything that's in the table, right? And then in the transformation, you can start creating a query here. Instead of creating one from the scratch, let me show you what I have in my IDPS table. Do this. So in my IDPS table, instead of seeing create a new transformation, I'm seeing edit transformation because I already have one. The name of my DCR here, my data collection rule, is DCR AZFW IDPS table. And then once I do next, these are the logs that are available with my DCR applied, right? If I click here on transformation editor, what I'm going to see is the query that I'm running. So let me just expand here. So here, what I'm pretty much doing is I'm creating a query that's filtering based on the action. So the action doesn't contain alert, and the severity has to be different than 3. So what I'm doing here is pretty much saying, show me everything that's denied and the severity is high or medium, right? And then one other nice thing that you can do as well is instead of ingesting all the columns, you can ingest only the columns that are really important for you. So in this case here, I'm projecting the time generated, the protocol, source IP, source port, destination IP and port, signature ID, category, description, and severity, right? Again, this one is something that I created for a scenario where I don't want to see any kind of alerts for low severity signatures. Maybe those are not very important to me. And this is just an example. There are different examples. Each customer that we talk to, they have specific scenarios where they need to only focus on a specific set of data. So this is one of the examples that we discussed and how you can apply it. Once you do this and then you go to your Log Analytics workspace, let me go back to my Log Analytics workspace and logs. Oops, logs. Where is logs? Here. Okay. Then I can do. Let me just create a new AZFW IDPS signature. I'm gonna do these in the last 7 days. Let's see what I have. So if you take a look here, you're going to see that I don't have anything. First, I only have the columns. I'm just running a simple ACFW ADPS signature. I'm not putting any wheres, any projections, anything like that. So I can see that just by running these, I see exactly the columns that I selected in my DCR, right? Of course, it brings another column here, but this is just to show you that these logs are related to this specific resource ID. And then you see, I don't see anything that's severity 3. Everything here is 2 or 1, right? So this is just an example. It is easier for running queries, but please make sure before creating these DCR and these transformations that you are not running other like workbooks or the other queries that depend on these logs the way they are, right? So make sure you have everything in line with your transformations once you start creating those if needed. Okay, so that's what I have for the demonstration. Coming back to the slides, I just want to go through some other updates that we have in our GitHub repo and in our blogs. So in the last 6 months, we created a query detection query. It's available in our GitHub. It helps with identification of brute force attacks. The query is available. You can just run that in your environment. You can create alerts based on that for helping you find activities related to brute force attack, right? This is all based on the signatures that are like privilege gains and things like that. So one thing that you may need to adjust depending on your scenario is the thresholds. The thresholds that we put in this example here is a lower threshold just for testing. But of course, every customer, every scenario may need to have different thresholds for creating these alerts. The other thing that we created was an Azure policy to help you auditing your environment and make sure that you are enabling the management interface for Azure Firewall. The management interface for Azure Firewall helps with the segregating what's management traffic from transit traffic, and it requires a new subnet, an additional subnet, and then there are some benefits on enabling these. Especially if you don't wanna have a public IP assigned to your firewall that's gonna be used for inbound traffic. So that's one of the requirements for enabling the management interface. And then in our tech community, we had 4 new blogs for Azure Firewall. The first one is about the transformation that we just talked about. The second one is the draft and deploy that I demonstrated in this session today. Then we have another one, which is the part 2 of the managing Azure Firewall using REST APIs. And the third one is maximizing savings using the basic plan. So these are the updates in our GitHub and our blogs. And with that, we come to the end of the presentation. And if we have any questions, we still have some time to answer some of the questions.
Great, thanks, Gustavo. Yes, a question just came through. It says, is there a direct migration path from vendor firewalls to use AFW? Are there any workbooks that can be used to feed in ACL rules and build firewall policies?
Got it. There, in our GitHub, we have 2 scripts, maybe more, to help customers who are using Palo Alto to migrate to Azure Firewall. So this script helps on transforming the rules they use in Palo Alto to the formatting of rules used in Azure Firewall. And I think the other one is for FortiGate, if I'm not wrong. But there is something in our GitHub. Other than that, there is no official documentation saying how to prepare for the direct migration or to help you migrate directly from third-party solutions to Azure Firewall. But if you have a contract with Microsoft and you have access to CSAs and other folks, then you can engage with them, and they will, based on your needs, they will help you map everything that you need for this migration.
Great.
And what's the other part of the question? Are there any workbooks that can we use? Oh, for the workbooks, we have a embedded workbook in Azure Firewall. This is a workbook that was created based on feedback received from customers of what they would like to see in these workbooks and all of that. However, we've seen many other customers creating their own workbooks based on different needs they have. But yeah, there is one that's available in the portal once you deploy it. You can also download the same workbook from our GitHub, or if you're using Sentinel, you can deploy once you install the solution for firewall in Sentinel. But other than that, you can also create your own workbook based on using the dashboards and logs that you want.
Perfect. And it looks like we had one other question that was unanswered in our chat, which says, today an installation of 2 modified RCGs takes approximately 8 minutes each, so 16 minutes total. What to expect with draft and deploy? Is it only 8 minutes in total?
That's what we are seeing. So once you are let's say you already have the rule collections, right? And then you are creating the draft and deploy to change multiple rules or different settings in your policy. Once you apply it, it won't take, let's say, for example, you before draft and deploy, you would have three changes in your policy, and then each change would take 8 minutes, right? Being a total of 24 minutes. With the draft and deployed, what you're seeing is that the same 3 changes will not take 3 minutes, right? Of course, there are situations where it may take more time, depending on how many instances are running in your firewall. Today, customers don't have the visibility of how many instances run because by default, the service is always scalable, and that's completely managed by Microsoft. So there are some triggers that scale in, scale out based on utilization, but customers are not able to see how many instances are running. So if you are, what I'm saying is that if you are applying the 3 changes in 2 active instances, it will take less time if you have 10 instances running. So 10 instances will take more time to apply the same 3 changes because you have 3 different sets of firewalls where that needs to receive the updates. But what we are seeing with the draft and deploy is that, yes, you're going to see a lower time for applying all these changes altogether.
Great. And it looks like that was our last question. So I just wanted to say thank you so much to Sai and Gustavo for being our guests today and for sharing all of that great information with our community. Also, thank you to the Q&A team who helped us with answering those questions and providing the resourceful information. To all the listeners still on the line, if you're someone who wishes to aid in the protection of the world from cyber threats and desire to have a say in shaping our strategies, blueprints, and recommendations, then we invite you to become part of our security community. Together, we can make a global impact. So join us at aka.ms/securitycommunity. This is also where you'll be notified about the upcoming webinars, events, and other announcements. For those of you who may have additional questions on the topics we just covered or other product-related questions, please feel free to raise them on our Microsoft Tech Community discussion space at aka.ms/anscommunity. Thank you all for being part of our community and for joining us on these webinars. We hope to see you next time. Goodbye.